Dear respected Thai, dear brothers and sisters, and dear Sangha, today is the 14th of October in the year 2018, and we are in the full moon meditation hall, Loving Kindness Temple, New Hamlet, in the fall rains retreat 2018. Today the weather is very beautiful and the weather is very pleasant. Everyone is joyful and we feel very joyful. Lower Hamlet, we had a community work day and the sisters and the lay friends, we worked together and everyone came out to work. We cleaned the lotus pond and we redid our walking meditation path. And everyone was very happy and joyful, and that energy, it still carries on today. And we hope that we will be able to have a very wonderful mindfulness day. So, dear Shigo, you need to share a joyful story, because after a day of working meditation, although it's very joyful, but our hands and our feet would feel like it's about to fall apart. But although we are very sore, but our mind is happy, but our body, our physical body, will be at ease and will be able to benefit from that joy, and it will be able to contribute for this day of mindfulness with the energy of happiness and freshness. The topic for today is about suffering and how to take care of suffering. So I need to invite the energy of joy in order to balance when I share about suffering, so that we will not be overwhelmed by suffering, the suffering that we may have. When my younger sisters knew that I was going to study about suffering, said that I will tease you so that you will suffer, so you can have experience, so that you can give a good Dharma talk. And I said that, I have plenty of experience on suffering. I don't need to have more experiences of suffering to give a good Dharma talk. So each time that we suffer, we think we have experience, but in actuality, each experience is never the same, and we see that we always fall upon a different mistake or a different obstacle, and through each obstacle we learn, and we say that in the future I will not make the same mistake. But when we meet a difficulty, then we also fall again. I don't know if in the Sangha everyone has had difficulties and suffering, whether it's little or a lot. I don't know if there's anyone in here that has no suffering. If there is anyone that doesn't have any suffering at all, then please raise your hand for me so I know. There's no one that's raising your hand. So it means that in all of us, we all have suffering, whether it's big or small. And we cannot say that the elders, that their suffering is bigger than those that are younger. When we are first born and they give their first cry, although the brothers and sisters, everyone is very happy, but it actually suffered very much, because it is the moment that it had to breathe on its own after it comes out from its mother's womb. The mother, when it was in the womb, the mother did everything for the baby, breathing, eating. But when it was born, then it had to make its first breath. And we cannot say that suffering is less than our suffering. And slowly that baby grew up, practiced to walk, to stand, etc., wear the shoes. Sometimes putting on the shoes, it suffers. It's in despair because it can't put on its shoes and tie its shoes. We laugh at that, you can't wear your shoes and you suffer. And you may laugh at that, but actually it suffers and it feels despair and it cries. The baby cries. And slowly it learns how to wear its shoes. And sometimes it suffers when it wants that shoes so much and it cannot have enough money to buy it. And once it has money to buy it, it can not buy a car now or buy a house now, then it suffers. it wants to do something and it's not able to do it. The baby is not able to do it. Or when we live out in society, we have a lot of suffering, a lot of pressure. We suffer. Or we think when we ordain and we will not suffer anymore when we ordain, but we actually also still have suffering, even as monastics. So if anyone thinks that out there's a lot of suffering in society, so I ordain here in the monastery, but be careful. So aspirants that are getting ready to ordain, so be cautious. You still have time to think back. Do you really want to become a monastic? Do you really want to avoid suffering from society? Because if you're trying to avoid or run away from suffering from society, then you will suffer just as usual. And that is the experience of brothers and sisters that are sitting here, and nobody has raised their hand saying that they don't suffer. So it shows that the brothers and sisters also have their suffering. And we do not say that the suffering, our suffering, is bigger or smaller. Sometimes it's more as the more discreet it is, then the bigger and the more painful it can be, then that suffering that everyone can see. So today I will share about suffering. It's the fourth of the 14 mindfulness trainings, and how we can get out of suffering. It's the Four Noble Paths, the Four Noble Truths. That it's very wondrous. It helps us to get out of our suffering that we have, whichever kind of suffering that we have. Whether it's like you cannot have money to buy a house, or you're addicted to the internet, or nobody comes and plays with us, and we can't come to anyone, or because of depression, or suffering because you've lost a loved one, your mother, your father. So all of that suffering helps us. These Four Noble Truths helps us to overcome suffering. Sometimes it's also called Tande. It's holy, the Four Holy Truths. Because when we practice this, we will become a holy person. And this is the first Dharma talk the Buddha gave after attaining enlightenment. He also ordained because of suffering. He saw that this life there's a lot of suffering. So even if I was a politician or political leader, then I would still have a lot of suffering. And so he left the palace to find the path, to help everyone to overcome suffering. And the Buddha also looked for many teachers in order to learn the path, the way. And every teacher, he was able to attain the highest that the teacher was able to offer, but he was still not satisfied, because everything that he learned, it did not help him to overcome his suffering. To birth and death, to overcome birth and death. And so he had to find his own path, his own way. He sat under the Bodhi tree. And this first Dharma talk on the Four Noble Truths that he was able to discover on the evening that he attained enlightenment. And it was also the first Dharma talk and for the five brothers, and it is recorded in the discourse on turning the wheel of the Dharma. And so the other methods for these five brothers that practiced asceticism, he saw that it did not help, so he tried to find his own way. And so after returning to these five brothers, at first, none of them wanted to receive him, because they saw that he was someone that gave up, that did not want to continue to practice with them, and said that when the Buddha comes, don't receive him, don't welcome him. No one should stand up to greet him. But because of his fine manners and his way of being was very bright, resilient. And so when the Buddha came, no one said spoke to them, but everyone stood up and greeted him and took a chair for him. One took water for him to wash his face. And after that, the Buddha gave the first Dharma talk on the Four Noble Truths. And the first truth is suffering. We have suffering. And the second is called Tap in Vietnamese, which is the cause of suffering. All of our sufferings has its causes, its reason, its root. And the third truth is the cessation or the end of suffering. Or sometimes it's called happiness also, because when we no longer suffer, then we are happy. And the fourth truth is the path. It's the path that leads to the end of suffering, or refraining from doing things that cause us to suffer. It's also the path of happiness. Tam chuyển is the three movements, the three turnings. It means that we can see, is to see that there is suffering. Like we see that we are addicted to internet, but sometimes we don't see that that is suffering. We have some emptiness and we have free time. We don't know what to do with that free time. So we go on the internet and we look for news. We look for good music, or we look for movies, and we lose ourselves in the movies or other websites online. And we do not sleep and rest at the time. The time it's supposed to sleep, we continue to go online and we are carried away by internet. But sometimes we don't see that that is suffering. So the first thing we need to recognize is that there is suffering. We have complexes. We see that we are not better than this person, but we don't see that that is suffering. And we don't dare to do anything because we are afraid that they will look down upon us. So we need to be able to see that that is suffering. And that is called thị chuyển. So thị means you're determined to stop. So it's to be able to see, and we encourage others to be able to recognize that. Khuyến chuyển. Because if we cannot recognize it, then we can't transform. Chính chuyển, it means that we need to be able to do so that we can end the situation of the addiction to internet. How we can end our complexes, our depression. And if we're able to do that, then it's called chính chuyển. And so in each of the truths, there are three turnings, or called movements, three movements. And so we need to understand. So there are 12 movements altogether, because each of the truth has these three movements. And in each of us, we have our suffering, different kinds of suffering. So we reflect and look deeply to see what is our suffering. What comes up often in our daily life. And we look deeply into it. And we ask, are we able to see that that is suffering? And when we're able to taste that suffering, then we will not want to suffer. And do we see the cause of the suffering, the root of the suffering? Do we want to end that suffering? And do we see the path of coming out of that suffering? And so I invite the entire Sangha to reflect and to invite our suffering that comes up often, and whenever we think about it, then our tears automatically run. Our heart is in pain when we think about it. And first of all, we recognize it. And each time we have suffering comes up, we recognize that suffering is present and we don't run away. We don't hide. The previous Dharma talk, Sister Hoi Nghiem had spoken about spiritual bypassing. It means we think that we are practicing, but actually we're not. We have suffering and we're not able to deal with it, to handle it. So we find ways in order to change the CDs, to change the peg. We invite other conditions to make us happier, to give us strength. But we actually don't want to return and to be in touch with our suffering, to come back to ourselves. And if we're not able to do that, then we can never transform our suffering. And if we continue to do that, then slowly we will have the tendency that we will always run away from our suffering. And when we return and we are face to face with our suffering, then it's much more painful than running away or hiding from it. And I think everyone has this experience. When we return to our suffering, then it's much more painful than running away from it. It's much more painful than changing pegs, changing CDs. But if we are not able to face our suffering, then we can never understand our suffering. Because if we are not able to understand our suffering, then we find ways. Because we don't understand, then we are never able to transform our suffering. But we cannot never understand our suffering when we are distressed. And so when we have suffering, before we find the reasons, then we need to breathe so that our suffering can be calm. It can be more settling. We can be more at ease. And we embrace our suffering. And we find the reason. That's the second step. It's like the Buddha taught when we have a poisonous arrow that has hit us. First, we take that arrow out, and then we take care of the wound. It means we don't look to like who was the one that shot the arrow to us. Where did this arrow come from? And in this arrow, what kind of poisons does it have? But first, we need to take care of the wound. So in that spirit, when we have suffering, we need to take care of the suffering first to make our suffering to be more calm, to be more settled, at ease. But when our suffering is already calm, then we need to take the second step. Although we use mindfulness to embrace our suffering, to calm it, but that is not enough. We need to take a second step. It means that we need to find the root, the cause of the suffering, why we have the suffering. And that is called tập đế in Vietnamese, which is the cause of suffering. The root of the suffering. And when we're able to find the cause, then we will know how to put an end to suffering, to that suffering. And we will have the path, a way to come out of that suffering. And that path is called Đạo Đế in Vietnamese. The path. And in the path, it has the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the 4 diligence, the 5 skandhas, 5 faculties, and the 8 noble, the 8-fold path. And last year we were able to learn the Eight Noble Path, factors of awakening. And the previous year, we were able to learn about the Noble Eightfold Path, and we learned it very thoroughly. One Dharma talk, we just learned one. And the four establishments of mindfulness, we've learned many times through Chai's Dharma talk. The five skandhas also. The four powers. But today I would like to share about the four reliances. They are the four four practices. Sometimes it's considered like supernatural powers. It's not like these supernatural powers. It's not being able to fly in the sky or walking on water or anything like that. But these supernatural powers, it's like you being able to master yourself. When we are in despair, you don't know what to do, and you feel that you are helpless, then you come back to yourself. You're in touch with yourself. We see that our body is something miraculous, and the earth is beautiful and wondrous, and we feel we have a lot of inspiration, and that actually is a supernatural power. It's a power in itself. When we see a person is suffering and they don't know how to come out of their suffering, and we help them by showing them the way, we see that their eyes are bright and their face is also much brighter and more fresh, radiant, then that is already a true power, a supernatural power. And a supernatural power is not walking on water or being able to fly. There was this young man that met the Buddha. I think that the Buddha and him, they were in a river and they wanted to cross the river. And this young man said that he can walk on water in order to cross the river. And the Buddha said, how long did it take you to have this power? It took him 2 years to be able to do this. I only need $2 coins to be able to cross to the other shore. It may be that when he shared that he could he was very proud to share that, oh, I can cross the water, but because he had a lot of pride. But I think that that's why the Buddha saw that. So then he said that because he had so much pride, then this is only worth actually two coins. Because you shouldn't be so proud. If he was humble, maybe the Buddha would give a higher price. And so when we are not praised, then we shouldn't be sad. We should return and look at ourselves to see if we have actually been really humble. Nhục như ý túc, it means our desire. What do we want? That's as a power. We want something very normal, then we will become just a very normal person. If we want something that is very, very high, then we will be able to have the capacity to attain that. If we want to become the Buddha, we will have that capacity, and we should not be afraid. How can I dream of, how can I dare to be the Buddha? To be like the Buddha, or to dare to want to be liberated. We should just have that wish, that desire, and we will be able. We should dare to have these sublime
có một
states.
cái buổi thuyết trình trong cái tuần
We
quán,
had
và
presentation
thuyết
class
trình
in our schedule
với nhiều đề tài rất
with
là
a lot
vui.
of topics,
Ví
and
dụ
it's very
như đề
joyful.
tài
For example, the topic
làm
of
sao để chăm sóc
how
sức khỏe
can
của
I
mình,
take care of my health?
làm sao để bảo vệ môi trường,
How can I
làm
protect
sao để
the
giữ được truyền
environment?
thông,
How can I
làm
establish
sao để
communication?
làm một sư cô hạnh phúc,
How can I be a
làm
happy
sao để cho
nun?
pháp thoại hay.
How can I give a good Dharma talk?
Và mấy chị em lên thuyết
And
trình rất là vui.
they gave very joyful
Tuy trong
and
trường hợp
fun
thuyết trình đó có em chưa học Phật,
presentations, even though there are
nhưng
those
mà
that have
em
not
thấy
Dharma teachers yet, but they still
sư
came
Trang
up.
Hằng nói là
And Sister
có cái
Changram
lời
shared,
thưa sư cô Hoi Nghiem 20 tuổi,
I am less
thì
than
20
you
năm
20
sau
years.
con
So
dạy cho
20
Phật
years
thoại giỏi
later,
như sư cô Hoi,
I will be
giỏi
able
hơn sư
to
cô Hoi
give
Nghiem.
a good Dharma talk just like you, or maybe even better.
Và con rất là vui khi
And I
mà nghe
felt
sư cô
so
nói là
happy when I heard her
không
share
phải
that.
là có một
And when
sự
we share
tự
that, it
hào
doesn't mean
nhỏ,
that we are proud and we think that
mà
we're
có
good.
20 năm
We have
để mình
20
đào tạo
years
cho mình,
in order to train
20 năm để
ourselves,
mình thực tập
in order to
làm một thầy
practice,
trò giỏi.
to be a good Dharma teacher.
Và con cũng nghĩ tới sư cô Châm Đức.
And I think about
Con
Sister
nghĩ là
Chung
20
Duk,
năm sau hoặc là
20 years
30 năm
later
sau,
or
nếu
20
con được
years
thực
more,
tập đậm
if
đà,
I
con
practice
cũng giỏi được như
diligently and
sư
well,
cô.
then maybe I will be able to be as good as her.
Và điều đó không có nghĩa rằng là
And
con
that
tự
does not
hào
mean that
về
I am
mình,
proud about myself,
nhưng cái đó là
but
cái để
it
mà mình đầu tư
means
cho mình,
that's something that I
để
am
mình phát
investing
triển
for
mình.
myself and I am training for myself.
Thầy thường dạy
Tai usually
là khi
teaches
mà mình đi
us
tu
that
thì
when
phải
we
có ước mơ
ordain, we need
100% thì
to
mình mới
have
quyết định đi
an
tu.
aspiration
Còn nếu mà
100%. And if we
ước
do
mơ
not,
của mình chưa đủ
if our
100%
aspiration is not
thì mình
100%,
thôi phải tu.
then we shouldn't ordain yet.
Có nhiều người hỏi là
There
con
are
thích
those
đi
that
tu
shared,
lắm,
I really want to become a nun,
nhưng mà tới đây dậy sớm,
but coming here, we wake up too early. It's
tới
too
đây ăn chay
tiring.
không có đủ chất,
And we
cho
eat
nên thôi
vegetarian
vậy mà.
food and it's not
Thì có người
enough
trong này mình cũng có
supplements
ý
for
muốn đi
me.
tu thiệt
So
lắm,
we really
nhưng mà
have
cái
that
nguyện
wish,
vọng
that
chưa đủ
desire,
mạnh.
but it's not strong
Con
enough.
thích đi tu lắm,
I really
nhưng mà
want to
không
become
còn
a
ba
nun,
mẹ ở
a
nhà,
monk, but I have my
cha
parents at
cha
home.
bạn trai
Nobody
hết,
can take
cho
care
nên
of
con phải
them.
ở nhà chăm
So
ba
I
mẹ.
need to take care of my
Thì tất cả
parents.
những cái ước muốn
So
những
all
gì
of
nó
this
rõ
wish,
ràng
all of these
rất là hợp
reasons,
lý, nhưng mà điều đó
they
không
have
phải
good
rằng là
reason, but it
cái ước
shows
muốn của mình
that your
chưa
wish, your
trọn vẹn,
desire is not strong
nó
enough
chưa
yet.
đủ 100%
It's
hoặc là
not
hơn
100% or more
100%.
than
Cho
100%.
nên mình mới có những cái lý
And
do
that's why
khác.
we have different reasons.
Thì mình phải quán chiếu lại
And we
mình
need to
có
reflect,
cái ước muốn nào,
what wish do we have?
mình có muốn giải thoát không,
Desire that we have. Do we
mình
want to
muốn
be
tâm,
liberated? Do we want to be the Buddha?
mình muốn cái tâm của mình rộng
Do we
lượng
want
không,
our mind to be
mình có muốn cái
spacious,
tâm mình bao
limitless,
la như biển cả không, hay là
like the
mình muốn cái tâm
ocean?
mình nhỏ hẹp.
Or do we just want us to be very
Một số bộ sư
small?
đại diện
Small?
rất là ngưỡng mộ các
Some
thầy,
sisters, they really admire the brothers. So I will
mỗi lần
kind of
quán chiếu lại
share
thì nói là
the
quý
secret. They
thầy
would
vì
share
sao
the
mà phóng
brothers.
khoáng quá,
Why
rộng
are
lượng
they
quá mà không có
so
nhỏ hẹp giống như mình.
um so liberal? Like why aren't they,
Nhưng mà mình cũng nên nhớ rằng
but we
là
should
cái tâm
remember
con người nó không có
that the
dừng lại
mind of a
ở cái
person,
giới tính,
it's not limited
nó không phải
to
là người này
gender.
thì luôn luôn ích
It
kỷ
doesn't
không,
mean that
không có
girls or
không
women
giữ
are
được rộng
always
lượng,
very
nhiều lúc mình cũng rộng
stingy
được nhưng không phải
and
là rộng lượng,
small,
để
and
mình
only
đạt
men
lại
are
cái
able
giác ngộ
to
toàn
be
năng.
very
Nếu
liberal.
mình vững chãi như núi mình
If
cũng
we
có
want
thể
to be
làm được
solid
tất
as a
cả.
mountain, then we have that capacity as well.
Cho nên mình phải tạo cho mình
So
cái
we
ước muốn
need
đó,
to
và khi mà
create
mình
that
có cái ước
desire,
muốn
that
sâu sắc rồi
aspiration
á,
inside of
thì
us.
tự nhiên
And when we have
buông
that
bỏ
deep
những cái khác,
aspiration, then we can let go of other
đừng có
things.
muốn nhiều quá.
Don't want too much though.
Mình muốn nhiều quá
If you want
cho nên
too
mình tạo
much,
lên chút tí
then
tạo
you
lên
put
chút tí
a little bit of
cuối
time
cùng
here,
có thể
there,
biết
and
im
then
có
in the end
bỏ,
you
có
don't do
bỏ mình
anything,
thấy
and then we have
trời ơi sao mà
despair.
mình làm
And
được
say
mà
that how
mình
come I
làm
can't do
được.
anything?
Mình muốn mình
If we
ngồi
want
chuông
for us
chuông
to sit
xong
at
cho
the
hay hay
bell,
là cho
to be
nhiều
able
người
to
là tốt như
chant
thầy Pháp Niệm,
well,
hoặc
like
là
Brother
hơn thầy Pháp
Phapnim,
Niệm nữa,
or even better than Brother
thì mình
Phapnim,
để thì lời
then
đọc
we
niệm Phật,
put the time to
mình
practice,
nghe thầy
to listen
thâu căn, mà
to
mình
his
không có nghe
chanting,
những cái nhạc tầm bậy tầm bạ,
and we don't listen to
những
other
cái
kinds of
lời mà tập
music,
trung vô đó,
worldly
thì từ
music.
từ
We
nó
put
mới
our
ra được tốt
time,
thật.
and slowly with time, our chanting will be
Mình
good.
muốn mình giác
If we want to be liberated, to be enlightened, then we will let go of little attachments. Then slowly our mind will be liberated.
Thì đó là dục như ý túc.
And that is called dục như ý túc, which is called desire as a power. Although we cannot be Buddha 100%, an enlightened, awakened being, then we can be 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%. Sometimes it goes back down to only 40, but that's okay. We practice again so that it can increase to 50, 80%. So this year we cannot be a fully enlightened being, then the next lifetime we practice until we become a Buddha. And when we have a great desire, then we will not be bothered by small things. Sometimes we suffer because of something very small. This person said this and it made me suffer. That person said this and it made me suffer. We practice wholeheartedly and our sisters say that we didn't practice wholeheartedly and we suffer. We try to play with everyone, to come to everyone, and everyone says we don't try our best and we suffer when we hear that. We want to offer to the Sangha, but our sisters keep saying that we keep showing off. But actually, we were just trying to be wholehearted to the Sangha, to offer to the Sangha. So when we have a great wish, then what time do we have to think of these things or to suffer from these things? Our mind, it has already invested in a certain direction. And the second, so the first is desire as a power, and the second is gang, như ý túc, which is diligence as a power. Like we want to be a Buddha, and we woke up, I said that, oh, I'm so tired, I'm gonna sleep. And we think that sitting meditation, I won't get any peace from that. I will go there and I will fall asleep and I will have more suffering. So it's better that I just sleep here. It's and I have more health and I would be more fresh to hear the Dharma talk. Because if I go up there and I fall asleep during the Dharma talk, etc. So the days pass by. We rest. We miss one session, 2 sessions, and we're no longer diligent in our practice sitting meditation. We're not diligent in walking meditation, diligent in practice, then how can we become the Buddha? We like to learn a language in order to serve, to help other people, but we don't study. We study other things. We are afraid to share English because we're afraid that they will laugh at us. Then how can we be good at speaking English? So we need to have that diligence. We need to be diligent. Every day we need to do it. It's not that we don't have to try to sitting meditation for 5 hours. We don't need that. But what we need is every day we are diligent. Whatever happens, but we go there for sitting meditation to breathe with our mind. And in actuality, we try to sit 5, 7 hours. It's not hard. If we try, we can do it. But we create a tendency, a habit that every day we do sitting meditation, whether it's just half an hour. That's where it's difficult because it makes us have this training of patience and steadiness, consistency. If we want to be a holy person, then we need to know the elements that the holy ones practice, and we need to be diligent to train our mind to behave like the holy ones. And it's not like worldly things. The next Dharma talk, Sister Hoi Nghiem will speak more in detail about diligence, right diligence. So I won't go into detail about these,
tôi chẳng cần nữa.
about the four diligence.
Và cái tầng thâm thứ ba
And the third power,
là tâm như ý túc.
tâm như ý túc.
Tâm ở đây gọi là chuyên chú, chuyên tâm vào.
Concentrated mind as a power. So our mind is very miraculous.
Các vũ trụ cũng có thể nằm trong trái tim,
All of the
nằm trong tâm của mình.
cosmos can be in our mind.
Những sư trì xem
Our
xem
elder brothers and sisters are also in our mind.
không khí,
The
dầu nước,
atmosphere, the air, the earth,
đều nằm
the river can also be in our hearts, in our mind.
những cái niềm vui,
Our joy, our happiness,
cảm hứng,
our inspiration, love, compassion, mindfulness
trái tim của mình.
is also in our concentrated mind or our heart.
Khổ đau,
At the same time, our suffering, our anger, jealousy,
trách móc, hiểu lầm, vân vân
blaming, etc., it can also be in our mind and in our heart. So we return to our mind and we will discover many things.
và ở trong tự nhị túc tâm ở đây đó là chuyên tập.
And so in these four minds, four powers, it's called Tam Như Ý Túc, which is the concentrated mind as a power. There's nothing in which we don't concentrate on and it doesn't
Cho nên mình phải chú tâm vào cái ảnh
manifest. So if we want, then we can become that if we are concentrated enough. If we put all of our mind and focus into it.
trong kinh tự niệm xứ của Ấn Độ,
In the four establishments of mindfulness, the first is the body in the body. And in the 16 breaths, the first four breaths are related to the body. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. We are aware of our breath. We just need to be aware of that and we don't need to do anything. And the second is to make our breath calm and at ease. Maybe in the beginning, our breath it's very, it's not very calm. It's very short. It's not very deep. And we just continue to follow our breathing slowly. Then it will be at ease. It will be calm. It will be deeper. It will be slower. And when we make our breath calm, the following step is we are aware of our whole body. We are aware of our face. Is it fresh? Is it joyful? Is it bright? Is it radiating? Are we frowning? Our mouth, are we smiling? Our shoulders, are they tense? Is our back straight? So we are aware of our whole body. And the fourth is to make our whole body calm and at ease. Calming my body, I breathe in. Calming my body, I breathe out. And we pay attention to our body, to our calm body. When we have suffering and our thinking is carrying us away, then we need to return to our body. Because our body, it's very calm. It's not agitated. So we need to establish ourselves in the present moment, to what is still. Why do we suffer?
Mình khổ là tại vì mình không
We
có khả năng
suffer
dừng lại.
because we do not have the
Mình
capacity
khổ
to
là mình bị
stop,
kéo theo cái
because we are carried away
đối tượng làm mình khổ.
by the object of our suffering.
Và thay vì mình đừng
And
con trên cái
instead
thân thể an
of,
tịnh của mình
of
á,
being
thì mình đừng con
concentrated
trên cái lời người kia nói cho mình.
in our body, then we are concentrated in what the other person
Mình
has
sẽ
shared,
con trên cái hình ảnh mà cứ làm mình
or the
khổ,
image
mình
that
khổ.
is making us suffer, and that's why we
Cho nên là
suffer.
mình quản chiếu lại.
And so we
Với cái khổ
contemplate,
của
we
mình.
reflect onto
Mình
our
sẽ thấy
suffering,
là
and we
hôm nay của
see
mình đừng
in
tâm
the
ở đâu.
day where
Mình chuyên chủ cái tâm của
are we
mình.
concentrating,
Mình có
putting
chuyên
our
chủ cái tâm
concentration
vào
to.
thân thể
Are we paying
an
attention
tịnh
to
của
our
mình không?
body, to our calm
Hay là mình
body,
chuyên vào
or
người
are we
kia không?
concentrating on what the other person had just shared?
Thì từ từ nếu
And
mà
slowly,
an trụ được
if
trong cái
we
thân thể
can
mình,
dwell in our body,
an tịnh của mình á,
to our
thì cái
peaceful
khổ đó
body,
nó sẽ
then
giảm
that
xuống.
suffering, it will diminish.
Thì khi mình ngồi thiền á,
And
mình
when we
làm
do sitting meditation, we practice like that
cảm thấy
also.
mình thở,
We practice following our
mình
breathing.
vào cái
We
thân thể an
dwell
tịnh của mình.
in
Và
our
thỉnh
calm
thoảng mình
body.
phải nhắc mình
And occasionally we need to remind ourselves,
thân hành tôi sẽ
calming
vô,
my body, I breathe
an
in.
tịnh thân hành
Calming my
tôi sẽ
body,
ra.
I breathe out.
Và mình nhắc mình như vậy
And we
là
remind
cho
ourselves
cái
that
tâm
a
của
couple
mình
times
thực sự
so that our mind can really be concentrated in
lâu
that
lâu
state.
mình thấy cái tâm
And
mình
slowly we see our mind running somewhere. Then we return to our body and we will remind ourselves again, calming my body, I breathe in. Calming my body, I breathe out.
Và khi mà mình thấy
And when
thân
we
thể của mình
see
nó an
our
tịnh rồi
body is
thì mình
calm,
định trên cái an tịnh đó,
then we are concentrated. We stay
mình định trên
concentrated
cái tâm
in that state of mind.
an tịnh thân hành. Tiếng
Calming my
calm down, calm my body.
ca-
Nhưng mà tiếng Việt nó hay lắm.
in Vietnamese, it's really wonderful. An tịnh. It also means this peace, and it also means
Này là nó yên, nó
Kin
lắng,
Ang, which is ease.
rất là tịnh.
It's very, very
Thì
calm.
mình an trụ trong
And so we dwell in this peace,
mình an trụ trong cái khinh
in
an,
this
nhẹ
tranquility,
nhàng.
in this ease. It's very light.
Và bất cứ trong cái tư thế nào cũng
And in
vậy.
whatever position, we can practice this.
Trong kinh tự niệm xứ của cô
In the
thì
four
trong
establishments of
bất cứ
mindfulness,
tư thế nào
in
mình cũng thể
whichever
hiện cái
body,
thức sáng tỏ.
we can use
Khi
this
đi, khi
awareness
ngồi, khi nằm,
when we are standing, walking,
khi chúng ta
sitting, carrying our
chiếu
alms bowl, washing our feet,
chiếu
etc.
cái thức sáng tỏ đó.
We can have this
Ý thức về hơi thở,
awareness, this bright awareness of our breathing, of our body,
về cái sự an tịnh của mình.
of our peace.
Cho nên cái sự thực tập của mình nó
And so
phải
our
trong khi
practice
ngồi
is
thiền
not just when we do sitting meditation, when we do walking
mình
meditation,
chơi,
but when we
mình cũng có
eat,
thể an trụ
we
tĩnh
can
tâm trên cái hình hài của mình.
we can dwell in the stability of our body, of our this concentration of our body. When we sit playing with our sisters, we can have a concentrated mind of peace in our body.
Và khi mà mình có thói quen này,
And when we have this tendency, this habit already, when we do sitting meditation, we can be peace.
còn không thôi á,
Then, if not, when we do sitting meditation, then so many things will come up,
nhất là khi mình khổ đau á,
especially when we're suffering.
nhớ là có một lần con
I remember I was suffering a lot.
đã hiểu lầm mình.
I had a misunderstanding and I felt a lot of fear.
Con người có
I felt a lot of fear for people in general. How can everyone misunderstand me?
giảm tiếp xúc với
And
người đó, mình
and
giảm tiếp xúc
I
với
feel
người
so
xung
fearful.
quanh.
I don't dare to be in contact with that person, with those around me, and I also feel angry with that person because they had misunderstood me, said that how come they don't have right view at all? And I feel angry. And I remember when I did sitting meditation, and I even when I was chanting, invoking the Buddha's name, I had anger. Then and I was like, oh no, the Buddha didn't make any mistakes, so why am I angry at the Buddha? And so when I was aware of that, the Buddha didn't do anything, so my anger calmed down. So it means that during sitting meditation, my mind was just following that object of suffering. And I didn't have the capacity to stop. But because of invoking the Buddha's name, I was able to recognize that what did the Buddha do? He didn't do anything. That why should I be angry at him? And my anger was able to disappear. There are certain suffering that always come and go inside of us. And we continue to come back to our mind. We just come back to our peaceful state of mind, our concentrated mind. And we dwell in that state of peace, tranquility. And then slowly we feel so at ease, happy. And we can take other steps with my concentrated mind. I will breathe in, and with my concentrated mind, I will breathe out. And we dwell in this state. And with this mind of liberation, I breathe in, and with this mind of liberation, I breathe out. And we remind ourselves that the mind of liberation, I breathe in, and with the mind of liberation, I breathe out. And when we remind ourselves each day like that, we know that what we are attached to. Why do we want to be liberated, and why are we caught or suffering with these little things? Like we have a beautiful cup, we want to keep this beautiful cup, but if somebody borrowed it, then we just continue to look at that cup to see if they've returned it. Who washed it? Whoever washed our cup for us, we're afraid that they will break it. We have a beautiful teapot, then we keep it for ourselves. Sometimes we want to liberate, but it just keeps being caught in little things like this teapot. If they broke the teapot, then we will yell. Then we don't feel that our mind is limitless, our heart is limitless. But inside we're like, oh, it's my most beautiful teapot and it's broken now. We have a beautiful knife and we really like this knife. But once I put it out, then this person borrows and then it gets lost. And we just pay attention to this life. We want to be liberated, but we keep thinking about this knife that we've lost. This is the suffering of the sisters. And I hope I share this small suffering so that we can transform it together. Of course, there are those who have already been able to overcome these obstacles. Like, for example, there are those that always go around with this small jar of a special salt. We want to be liberated, but that special jar of salt, we cannot be liberated from it. We always need to bring it with us, or we need to bring like Maggi soy sauce with us, or chili pepper to make our bowl of rice taste yummy. We need to have these things, but we say we want to be liberated. So I share this. It doesn't mean that I am completely liberated, but I share this so that they can see that my weaknesses, so that you can help me to transform. And if each day we remind ourselves with the mind of liberation, I breathe in, and with the mind of liberation, I breathe out, then we can let go of these small attachments. Those are material things. Outside, it's easier, but there's things inside of our mind. If we cannot let go of these small material things, then it's even harder for when it comes to our mind. We love and respect an elder sister, but she said something and we feel sad, upset. all of the beautiful images of that person, it's no longer in our eyes, and there are some sisters that that admire me. I say that please just like that, if like you've built, like you've put them up very high, like and uh, pedestal on a pedestal. So then she said that you should chop that off and make it a little bit higher so that I can fall down. Uh, because you should look at your elder sisters just normal. Don't admire them too much. So that our elders can also be human, and they can also have mistakes, shortcomings, weaknesses, so that we can be in touch with them in a very beautiful way in our mind, and not just because of a few saying sentences that we lose the beauty, the image, the beautiful image that we have of that person, or we lose communication with that person. Of course, that wound, that pain is very painful. But when we return and take care and practice, then we can transform the pains and the wounds. The body and mind are one, and they are connected to each other very closely. Whatever happens to the body, then it will happen to the mind. And what is happening to the body, then the mind, then it will happen to the body. So when we have a pain in our mind, then we return to our body and we feel, where in our body is it accumulated? Maybe in our mind, we have a headache. Then we massage our head. Our shoulders, it's very stressed. We massage our shoulders. Or in our chest, in our heart, it's heavy. Then we massage our heart or our chest. And if we put our mind to that pain, the area of pain, we will feel it will release the tension. And when it's released, the tension is released, and the pain will lessen. And slowly our mind will be concentrated. It will in our body, and it will not be concentrated in what the person has said or what the person did. So we need to reflect and look deeply into our daily life. Where are we putting our mind? What are we concentrating on? Whatever we concentrate on, then that's what we will become. Although our family has a lot of difficulties and we want to help our family, but we always think of difficulties and that suffering, then we cannot help anything at all. If we want to help others to suffer less, then first of all, we need to alleviate our own suffering. But if our mind is concentrating on that suffering, then slowly we will become crazy and we will not be able to help. We don't always need to think about that suffering. We are aware that our family has difficulties and they need help. But we need to return to ourselves. We know that our brothers and sisters have suffering and they need help, but we need to return to ourselves. And so we need to reflect, look deeply. And the fourth supernatural power is Quán Chiếu Như Ý Túc. Quán here, it's using insight in order to look deeply, to to reflect, and we need to contemplate, to reflect why we have the suffering. It needs to go after the first three steps, because we need to calm our suffering. Then from there we can look deeply, because if we haven't, then that is actually just our thinking, and we think that we are looking deeply and contemplating, but it's actually not. Usually when we have suffering, blaming usually always accompanies with it. And we have to see, is our mind calm yet? And when we have blaming, then it shows that our mind is not calm yet. And so we need to return to concentrate our mind in our body. Don't contemplate. We need to take the arrow, the poisonous arrow, out to heal the wound. And once the wound is healed, then we need to ask. Then we can ask the question: Why do we always get the arrow? And maybe we're sitting at a spot where people always think that we're a deer, so we need to sit somewhere else. For example, we do something else. When we suffer because of this person says this with us or say that with us, I think maybe Sister Dong Nghiem has this difficulty. When we are a mango and they say that we are a guava, but so are we a mango or are we a guava? We are a mango. If they say that we are a grapefruit and lemon, what are we? We are still a mango. Then why do we have to suffer? We are a mango, a sweet mango, and we said that this is a green mango and it's sour. Then what are we? We are still a mango that is sweet and fragrant. And if we are a green one and it's sour, then what kind of mango are we? We are still that mango. So not because they say that we are not as beautiful, that we become not as beautiful, or if they praise us, that we become better. But we just suffer because of these sayings, these compliments. So even if they praise us, they praise us all the way up to the cloud, we know that we are just on this earth. Or even if they kind of like suppress us down all the way to the earth, we are still. So I know that this is very difficult. It's very difficult when we have misunderstandings. When I sat eating, my tears came down even when I was doing sitting meditation, while eating, when sleeping, when there are misunderstandings. But if we don't practice, then we will always suffer. So we need to contemplate, to look deeply. So the Buddha has taught us many, many methods, practices. He taught us about impermanence, about interbeing. We see that we interbe with our elder brothers and sisters, with our younger brothers and sisters, like one body, and working together very harmoniously. The eyes is not more proud than the foot. I am the one that always sees and shows you the way. And the feet never says that, you never take the way. You always have to wait for someone to show you the way. It never says that. The eyes is not proud like that. Our eyes. And the feet does not have a complex. How come I am always on the floor? Why am I not the one leading the way? Because the foot is aware, the feet are aware, and the eyes are aware that they are one body.
Mình làm việc rất là nhịp nhàng.
We work very harmoniously together.
Cái đôi tai nó cũng ganh tị.
The ears is not jealous of the mouth. How come you always sing?
Tại vì cái miệng là để hát.
Because the mouth is for singing.
Cho nên nếu mình có một giọng hát hay,
if we have a beautiful voice, then we should just sing. And we offer to the Sangha. Why should we be silent?
Tại vì im lặng là nhiệm vụ của đôi tai.
Because silence is for the responsibility of the ear to listen. Because I don't sing well, so I always listen.
Họ rất là thích nghe hát.
Because
Mình là người hát hay.
so if you sing beautifully, then you should just sing beautifully.
Và cứ như vậy thì
And in that way, our body, it's very harmonious. And in that way,
tâm của mình sẽ hoạt động rất là
our Sangha will also be very harmonious.
và họ sẽ không có bị bệnh,
And it will not be sick.
không có bị bế tắc.
It will not be stuck.
Tất nhiên mình làm cái gì mình cũng học.
Whatever we do, we always learn. A baby growing up, it needs to practice to talk, to speak. At first, it says bibo biba, and nobody can understand, only the mother, but others don't understand anything. And slowly, slowly, it practiced to speak a word and then sentences. And sometimes it's also proud. The baby is proud of just, sometimes it's just able to put on its shoe and it feels very proud. Sometimes we also feel really proud of what we can do, although it's very small, and we can learn so that it's not that we don't do it, and then so that we cannot be proud. Because sometimes we don't do something, but we have these very subtle pride, and others can see it. And so as we do, we learn. And there is nothing that can stop us from learning. So when we practice, when we ordain as monastics, I very much cherish this path because it has never stopped me from learning. Learning from my elder brothers and sisters and my younger brothers and sisters, and learning from our own experiences. And each time when everyone praised me for doing something, instead of what I do instead is I join my palms and I say thank you. I will continue next time. And this thank you does not think that I am proud and I think I'm good, but we are grateful in order for me to continue to water these good seeds in me. And each day we reflect, we contemplate, we look deeply, we will be able to do it. This Falls Rains retreat in Lower Hamlet is very joyful. The sisters are very happy and are very grateful. We have lay friends, long terms, that come with us, stay for 3 months, and they help in the tasks, the daily tasks, pot washing, mopping the floor, etc. And each day like that, the sisters have less work to do, the daily cleaning, and they are a little bit more free and have a little bit more time to study and to invest in ourselves. And because of that, the sisters are more happy and they are able to nourish that gratitude inside their hearts and feel more close with others because they see us, each other, as one body, as one Sangha. And the sisters are so grateful for that, although we have not shared with our long terms, our 3 months. So today I would like to represent Lower Hamlet to express our gratitude to our 3-month retreatants of all hamlets. the same as the other Hamlets. I will read the fourth precept. Taking care of suffering, aware of the suffering, and looking deeply into the nature of suffering can help me to have more understanding, to have compassion. I vow to practice to return to myself and to use the energy of mindfulness in order to recognize, accept, embrace the suffering inside myself. Instead of running away or hiding from suffering and finding ways to cover up my suffering by consuming, then I will wholeheartedly practice my conscious mindful breathing and my mindful steps to look deeply into the roots of suffering. I am aware that I can only and once we have understood our own suffering, we will be able to understand the suffering of others. We are committed to finding ways, including personal contact and the use of telephone, electronic, audiovisual, and other means, to be with those who suffer so we can help them transform their suffering into compassion, peace, and joy.
Để hiểu biết được tình trạng của họ và để giúp đỡ họ. In here it speaks. We are aware that looking deeply at the nature of suffering can help us develop understanding and compassion. This life, there's a lot of suffering. So we need to be in touch, in contact with that suffering so that we can nourish our mind of understanding and compassion. We are determined to come home to ourselves, to recognize, accept, embrace, and listen to our own suffering with the energy of mindfulness. We want to help another person suffer less. First of all, we need to help ourselves suffer less. If we cannot help ourselves to suffer less, then we cannot help anyone suffer less. So even though we have a limitless, boundless heart, and we call for peace or we do charity work, helping to protect the environment, but if we don't transform our own suffering, we call for peace with our anger, then that calling for peace, it doesn't have any meaning. We call to protect the environment, it doesn't have any meaning. So everything starts with ourselves. We want to build the Sangha, but we don't have peace. We don't have happiness. Then first of all, we need to return to the peace inside of ourselves. And if we build the Sangha with the mind of no peace, then we can't help at all. It's better we do less, but our mind is at peace. Because peace is the foundation, and actually when our mind is at peace, then we will have the capacity to do many things. Because we will not lose time to transform that what is not peaceful inside of us. And we will lose a lot of time in order to transform. If we have complexes, we will need a lot of time to transform these complexes. So the best is not to have any complex, so you can do other things. And so we need to return to ourselves, to listen to our suffering. And when we don't run away from suffering, then we will know how to love ourselves. Yesterday,
in Lower Hamlet, there was a Q&A with the short-term friends, and there was a person that asked, how can I love myself? I see I can love others more easily, but loving myself, it's very difficult. That is a habit that we have. With others, we are very courteous. We speak very gently, but in our family, sometimes we are not like that. As we are with strangers, sometimes, even though they are our loved ones. So usually there's a lot of conflict, dispute that happens right in our family. And so we need to learn how to be gentle and courteous also with our family, with our elder brothers and sisters, with our younger brothers and sisters. With sometimes when we are close with someone, it kind of we forget, we take it for granted. And sometimes we treat others more kindly than with ourselves. So we practice that we need to take care of ourselves like we take care of others. If we can be gentle with others, then we should be gentle with ourselves. If we don't blame the other person, then we should not blame ourselves as well. And slowly we will know how to learn love ourselves. And we should not run away from our suffering. We should return and be in contact, in touch with our suffering, and we will know how much we suffer. And when we suffer too much, then we will not ask for more. Because do we not suffer enough already? Is that not enough? So why should we ask of ourselves more? Demand more of ourselves? We just imagine there's a baby. It's very, very clumsy, and it's not very beautiful. The baby is not very beautiful, and everyone always says, "Oh, you're not very beautiful. You're so clumsy," and this baby suffers a lot. And if we were its mother, what would we do? If we were the mother of this child, do we say that, "Why are you so clumsy? Why are you so ugly?" No, we would never say that. We would just love and embrace this baby in our arms because we see that this baby, our baby, suffers enough and others already, look down upon this baby enough, and I don't need to add more judgment. And we are also the mother of ourselves. If we have blaming of ourselves, we see that we are clumsy, we have a lot of weaknesses, then we need to embrace ourselves and love ourselves. And we see that's enough. And when we're able to love ourselves like that, then we will not ask or demand others or blame others. Blame others. Sometimes we say we don't blame others or we demand others, but in actuality, that's just kind of up intellectually. But inside of us, we are. But when we actually really are able to love ourselves, embrace ourselves, then we can actually embrace and love the other person. And loving ourselves is the base, the foundation to love others. If we do not love ourselves, then we cannot love another person. If we cannot understand ourselves, then we cannot understand another person. Understanding ourselves is the foundation to understand and to love others. If we want to help another person, and with us and the other person, there has been dispute, there has been blame, there has been kind of demanding. Why did that person transform? Why did they not listen? Why did they not transform, etc.? Then we need to return to ourselves, listen to ourselves, understand our suffering. And from that experience, then we will know what we should share. There are times we are just silent, and that's enough. We don't need to say anything. Maybe we will say something and they won't even listen. So what's the point of saying anything? Sometimes we just need to be present for them to be able to share their suffering. And our role is just to sit still and listen. And we learn the art of listening deeply, like the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, for them to suffer less. It's not to listen to the person suffering and then you go and you tell somebody, gossip about it with somebody else. And then the next time they won't trust us anymore because, it's like a deep heart-to-heart sharing that they're doing. Now everybody knows about it. So we need to know how to keep it confidential for others. And even if you want to share with others, then we need to breathe and know that we shouldn't share it with others so that we can be a place of trust for others. So do not run away from suffering or try to cover it up. And when we have suffering, we return to our practice of conscious breathing and walking like I shared earlier. And we dwell in our breathing and in our body. And to be able to find the roots of suffering, look deeply into the roots of our suffering. Once we understand our own suffering, we will be able to understand the suffering of others. Yesterday, there was a lay friend that asked the question, I will go to do charity work, to be in touch with the suffering of a number of countries, like prostitution, street children. So how can I be in touch? So we don't, how can I understand their suffering? So we don't need to live out in the streets to understand these children that are living in the street. We do not need to be in hunger in order to understand those that are in famine. So when we are hungry, we can understand how their suffering is. Or if we have that experience, then we can understand a little bit. But we only need to return to our own suffering, then we can understand the suffering of others. We have had despair, for example. We have been tired. And we had been in a state where we have not wanted to do anything. Then that person, it's the same. Even though the object, it's different, the object of their suffering is a little bit different. But we have gone through despair, where we have not wanted to do anything, where we have gone through depression. We don't want to say anything to anyone. It's enough suffering. We don't want to be in touch, in contact anymore. We want to run away. And so that person's suffering is like our suffering. So understanding our own suffering is understanding others' suffering. And when we can be aware of that suffering, that is called thi chuyển. It means we're able to see and to stop. And by finding ways, including personal contact, the use of telephone, electronic, audiovisual, and other means, to be with those who suffer, so we can help them transform their suffering into compassion, peace, and joy. So we encourage ourselves and we encourage others to be able to stop to see the suffering everywhere in the world. And although we suffer, then we can be in touch with the suffering of others to see that our suffering, sometimes maybe it's just a grain of corn and we thought it was really big. Sometimes we have a lot of storms, but our storm, it's just like a storm in a bowl of soup. But we call it like, we feel that it's like a storm that's very, very big and we suffer. But sometimes we just need to be in touch with suffering of the world or outside. Then our suffering, it's very small and it will automatically dissipate. And so we need to be in touch with suffering of others. That's why we need to be in touch with suffering of others, but just in moderation, because too much, then we'll be pulled away and we will suffer like them. Then it's not correct either. We need to have equanimity, we need to have a balance between taking care of our suffering and the suffering of others. And when we see we forgot to be in touch with our suffering and we only see our suffering, then we know that we are falling towards one extreme. And we need to be in touch a little bit with the suffering of others. And if we see that we are in touch with the other suffering and we lose ourselves also in our suffering, then we know that we are falling to another extreme. So we need to return to ourselves, nourish our happiness, to be in touch with our breathing, our peace inside of us, to balance ourselves. We are committed to finding ways, including personal contact and the use of telephone, electronic, audiovisual, and other means to be with those who suffer. We can do it based on our own experiences. We can do it for ourselves, and we help our younger brothers and sisters to transform their suffering, and our lay friends to transform their suffering. We come here to practice ourselves. We go home and we help our loved ones to transform their suffering, and we practice together. And that is called Zheng Jun, the realization. And with these practices, so when we are able to understand, to truly understand the Four Noble Truths, we need to understand how these three turnings work. And I hope the Sangha slowly will practice diligently so that in the end, all of us will become holy ones, so that we can live together in a holy Sangha with a lot of happiness and joy. I respectfully thank the Sangha for listening to me.